oh, we've shown you this, you've got this counter for a cross, or you've got this cover, you've got these evasions and things. And he's sort of doing a nice little review of what we had been doing. But then he's like, but you really can just do this. And he just brings the elbow up and destroys the shot coming in.
Oh, yeah.
And I just went, that's what I've been looking for when I have been interested in martial art.
Hello, my name is Jamie Sparling, and welcome to the FormABLE podcast, where we talk about formable moments in the lives of martial artists and in martial arts training. Today I have Christopher Harley with me. He has numerous different instructorships. He's been someone who came to Affinity Martial Arts and did a great seminar workshop for us, and somebody that, quite honestly, I admire quite a bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about tracking, school, as well as a great many other things. Hey, Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on. You were the first person to ever show me a little bit on the dummy.
Oh, I hope it was useful.
It was, right? It was my first time ever putting my hands on it, right? So you showed me a couple of things, and then you had me repeat one thing several times. And I actually have a dummy now, and I was training with it this morning, and I actually thought about that. And I was like, how cool is that today I was in there working on set 3 from the JKD, and here you are. You spent time at Francis Fong's Academy, didn't you, sir?
Yes. Yeah. I spent about 5 months there, maybe just shy of that. And then went on to train at some other places and got a call from them. They were moving and invited me to come back and put in 2 solid years. So that was really very generous of them to have me be part of that. So basically 2.5 years directly under Sifu Francis at his academy.
Wow. I mean, that literally hands-on right there.
Oh, yeah.
The time. That's just amazing.
He was very, very generous. I got a lot of private time with him. I learned a ton. I'm always learning a ton from him, but it was transformative. Yeah.
One of the neat things that you did for us at the Eating an Elephant seminar at our first location was had us break into groups of 3. And as soon as you told us and we talked about it, we all got up, grabbed a training partner, and started moving around. And then after about 2 minutes, you stopped us, and it was just so funny because we just talked about that. Have you been able to do the Eating an Elephant workshop anywhere else?
I did it one other time, or specifically that one, one other time. I learned a lot from what I shared with you guys, so it was a bit more active. There was more eating of the elephant during that seminar than just the learning how to do it. But it went pretty well. And then in general, I tend to do a little bit of helping people prep for when, say, Guru Dan is going to be at their school or something like that. Or it might be a school that there's a little bit of a breakdown between their, say, the BJJ students don't seem all that interested in the Kali or something.
Yeah.
And then I've been brought in and I'm just sort of sharing the art and helping bridge and explore and explain how training the Kali is going to make your BJJ better, how training the BJJ can make your Kali better, all that kind of stuff. So that seems to be the niche that I found, although I haven't been doing much of anything for the last couple of years because pandemic threw a little monkey right there. But that's sort of what I did, or what I seem to be good at is
I think
pointing out like, hey, all this stuff is actually the same.
And sometimes that, we pee in the Cheerios when we say that, but it's literally, you got to move your body, and relative to another human being, it's got to be relatively the same, right? I mean, Yeah.
Physics is still physics.
Sir, absolutely. Yeah. The workshop you did for us was great. I'm glad you took something away from it too. But I mean, for us, we had, a lot of my students had never been to as many seminars as maybe I had. So that was a really good intro for them, I thought.
Good. Cool.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your martial arts training?
Uh, as in like what I'm doing these days
Well, when did
or
you,
my background.
yeah, your background, just a little bit, if you don't mind.
So you had brought up tracker school.
Uh-huh.
I've been going to that since I was like 15, 16 years old. You'd think I would actually remember, but it's been so long. Anyway, at that school, there's a class that the morning sessions have a component with martial art in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructors for that were all through, generally through MKG. And then obviously through Guru Dan. And it was my first direct exposure to Kali and JKD. I'd had some exposure to Muay Thai. What else did they do there? It was a nice mix of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. Actually, it's a fun story. It's like the final sort of lecture goodbye from the martial art instructors.
Mm-hmm.
As they're wrapping up stuff. And George Larson was talking and saying, oh, we've shown you this, you've got this counter for a cross, or you've got this cover, you've got these evasions and things. And he's sort of doing a nice little review of what we had been doing. But then he's like, but you really can just do this. And he just brings the elbow up and destroys the strap coming in.
Oh, yeah.
And I just went, that's what I've been looking for when I have been interested in martial art. It just cuts right through. There's a practicality to it. Mm-hmm. It's offensive, defensive. It's an aggressive mindset without being like get in on top aggressive. It just something sparked. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna train this stuff. So they would do week-long classes, intensives that were like 9 hours a day of training.
Like the Smoky Mountains camp style stuff, or
very much, yeah.
Okay.
Like the Smoky Mountain, like the MKG camp.
Yes, yes, sir.
But out in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and that was really fun. Did that a number of times. Met Kurt Cornwell at one of those. Although, well, I think technically we met at his scout class, but he might not have met me, but I met him. He'd know what that means. Mm-hmm. And I just got into it at that point. And I ended up moving to Los Angeles. Dina Sano Academy was there. So I was like, well, I might as well train.
Since I'm going to do this gunting thing, I might as well do it there, right?
And I'd been training, but it had all been seminars, and getting whatever I could get on my own or with training partners that usually didn't last very long, just because lifestyles and stuff. So there I was in LA, and I started training, and next thing I knew, Tim Becker and I are training 22, 24 hours a week, getting a bunch of time in with Steve Larry.
Yeah.
And that just kind of was what I did I had a part-time job that I paid for, and then was doing body work for income, which relates back to the tracking actually in ways like I said for a number of years when people were like, oh, you're into martial art. I'm like, well, actually I'm just tracking. It's a way to keep my awareness training going and studying movement. And that was a big part of what I was doing. And then I got a weird illness, started to get a little bit better from it, and went, well, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to train. So I had the kind of life and the kind of support that would let me go and do, 5 months in Atlanta or go and do 5 months in Minneapolis.
That's amazing.
The initial plan was actually go do a season. So go do three. I was going to go three places because before Sifu Larry died, he knew how much I was into the close range stuff, and I was like, so any recommendations of where to keep focusing? And he said Rick Fay, Sifu Francis, and Eric Paulson. And they were already on my list. I'd already been training with them a little bit. So I was like, okay, I'm down. I completely agree with all of those. So I did the time in Atlanta, did some time in Minneapolis. And by then I had kind of overtrained and worked my body down. So I never ended up doing the 4-month chunk in at Eric Paulson's, but it's come up from time to time. People are like, well, you still could do it. I'm like, I think I'm cool with just getting the training when I can. I'm 50. I don't need to go bang around with them. I'd be in the way of the fight training. I think the folks that are there for the competition would probably find me tedious, but
you never know. But I mean, still, you did a lot. That's amazing. There's a lifetime of hands-on learning there. I did not know, Chris, that everything started with tracking school.
Yep, that was my first real. I wasn't a good student. I really had a problem with authority figures who weren't good at being authority. So really didn't respond well to teachers who were kind of like, just do what I say. I'm like, you're gonna have to convince me. And tracker school was the first place that I really Tom Brown was the first teacher I ever had that looked me in the eye and said, you got to prove it. He actually, the opening lecture at his school, it changed over time. But when I was there, at least what I have written in my notes was, if you believe everything I say, you're a damn fool. Prove me right or prove me wrong. What he actually said before that in my class was, I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to try to fuck with you.
Wow.
If you believe everything I say, you're a damn fool. Prove me right or prove me wrong. And I just really respected that.
I bet. And right at that age too, with that kind of dichotomy going on, right? That's just that. I'm sure that was like, huh. So how did it go? Did you prove him wrong?
It was fun to. As you learn and grow in anything, you can get some perspective looking back and understand. Like, there's certain kinds of mistakes you have to make.
Well, absolutely.
And so he had different ways of making sure you'd run right into him.
Okay.
So you would have to make that. Also, there were some little tests. Like there would be times I'd be hanging out with people that really thought themselves pretty skilled at tracking. But there would be some things that they would say about, say, a gait pattern or what they were interpreting as sort of like a weight distribution or number of times that a foot has registered on the ground, left a mark, that they'd say it and you're like, oh, you haven't actually tested that one. Because if you had tested that one, you would have found out really pretty quickly that it was total bullshit. Which did get some. I mean, there were some people who had their own tracking schools that they had some problems with and criticisms of Tom as a tracker, but only because they were hearing from his students certain things, and they just didn't know that he knew that was wrong.
It's but like it was martial arts in a way. There's I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely in the wilderness education world, it's just as much stupid in fighting as there is in martial art. And
actually, good to know. I'm sorry, Chris. That's I'm sorry to hear that. Yet I'm not that sorry. I don't know.
Well, anything that you're getting into, you see it with any real passionate pursuits, but particularly when there's an art aspect to it.
The subjective piece.
So there's
is that what I'm hearing?
Not just the subjective piece, but the fact that there's like aspects that it's you can't put words to very easily. So whatever words do get put to them, people start parsing and criticizing those things. But also because it's a passion and again, there's this artistic thing to it. It's just really easy to have it be personal, to be really,
Sure.
and to get your identity caught up in it. And so that can make people really defensive, and also they start to lock in, as we humans do. We, instead of going, oh, I'm learning really interesting stuff that inspires me, and I'm learning it in a certain environment, I'm still attributing that learning to the person who taught me rather than the environment itself, which is another thing I really enjoyed about Tom Brown. Is he basically was like, I'm just here to keep pointing at the world and telling you, go learn from the world. And here are ways to do that. And here are ways I can trick you into doing that. Or here are really good tools for doing that. But when I hear people in martial art talking about, like, if you don't spar, you can't functionalize, you don't know it. I don't disagree with any of that stuff, but I also think there's a really important thing to the sparring aspect that gets overlooked and not talked about, and people who would otherwise not necessarily enjoy or appreciate sparring, especially if it's sparring with, all sparring does have rules and constrictions. If it doesn't, it's not sparring.
Exactly.
It just, then that's just free for all. And that's fine, but that's what you're doing. You're not sparring. Yeah, you're not sparring.
Yeah.
And the thing that sparring provides is an environment to really explore the art close to in the wild.
Like a day at the park before you go out into the wild.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And people think sparring has to be this like high pressure, high speed, or whatever. And I think it's more useful if you're looking at it as those are elements that can be there. But mostly what this is for is, now let's actually play. Let's actually get in the world and move our bodies around and see how much separation we really have from each other. Or can you actually, dissolve that whole enemy and other thing?
Yes.
And I say that, and I'm sure there are people going like, wait, what? Why did this get all foo-foo all of a sudden? I actually mean all those things in very practical ways. And again, that's the environment where you can explore that more so than when you're playing feeder and receiver roles or any of that stuff. Those are ways to get into rhythm and to feel those connections, but the exploration is going to happen in the play.
Absolutely. My first teacher, Guru Steve Fristo, he used to say Kali was very serious play. And that always stuck with me. And when it becomes too serious all at once, it's more a game of yelling as opposed to a conversation that's going on. And although you have to know how to scream if you got to win the fight, that's not the point for most of it. And for a lot of people, maybe.
Well, one of them is an argument and the other is a communication. There's communication in an argument. The other is a conversation. Arguments are going to happen. But one of the interesting things about like resolving conflicts is, especially with things like arguments, how often they're based in misunderstanding. So it starts to actually be more like a translation problem, even though you think you're both speaking the same language. And so I think of what your teacher had said about it's serious play. I think that's part of what's so awesome and so brilliant in the Kali, and in different ways in the Silat, that it is this, you're starting to develop these ways to interpret language. And it's built into the learning of the art because there's so many different languages and so many different systems and or so many different styles from so many different places. You literally are translating, but also you keep making the same physical shapes. So it's like, oh, you call that a whatever, we call this a whatever. And it starts to be like appreciative more than combative in the training environment.
For sure, because a good idea is still a good idea, universally.
Right. And someone, instead of in that sort of serious play, instead of when someone, gets a touch on you or keeps exploiting something in your distance or timing.
Mm-hmm.
You can have that, oh, I'm frustrated and I want to get them back. But it doesn't take very long before it starts being like, that's really cool. I want to be able to do that. And that's a different perspective. That's a different way of coming at it. I definitely favor that way. I'm always looking for the like, hey, that's cool. I want to do that too. More than the, I don't like that, or that would never work, or any of that stuff. It's more like, I don't see how that can work. So I'm going to work with it some more because there's got to be something there. Then, then you discover whatever you discover for yourself.
For sure, without dismissal in your head because you don't understand it. That's one of the coolest part of martial art. I mean, for us, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, is that's exactly what you're saying there.
And that's why I also would say for years and years, I'm like, well, yeah, I am studying martial art, but what I'm doing is tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, that's just sort of always it. Actually, all human beings are trackers. That's our unique technology, psychotechnology. It's specifically different from other critters. The way that we think about time and space and orient in it and problem solve with that. But the thing that's really neat about it is very similar to martial art, with just a little bit of actual need. Mm-hmm. You find out pretty quickly how much you actually can do or can't do or do understand or don't understand. Because the consequences are pretty immediate.
You don't have to ask yourself a second time.
Yeah, it's hard to blow smoke up your own ass. However,
there's got to be yoga poses for that, Chris. Come on. Now, all right. Anyway, we're coming back. We're getting serious now.
But the funny thing is, if you're not getting a lot of time training, it's really easy to blow smoke up your own ass. And that's the same in martial art too, right? The more you are training, the more you're like, you're always screwing up. You're always learning something. You're always doing, as opposed to you get some time away from that and you start to build in your head, like, I'm really something. It's like, okay, next time you're in the gym, we're going to find out if that's true.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. That's it. Kind of like going through the world with like Glory Days playing in the background. You know what I mean? An idea of what's going on, and it gets makes total sense. Tracker school, okay?
Yeah.
As a young person, what did you take away from that was different a few years later? Because you have such a progression in there of different times of your life, right? And martial art for a lot of us, I think sometimes it's the same thing, and so sometimes it almost speaks to a time in your life when you got to train with somebody. For me, it was a time in my life where I got to train with Pa Herman for like a year and a half at like a bunch of different seminars, not personal training at all, but I also had, yeah, exactly. That's magic. That's magic to feel that magic and to understand, and it all started with me having a magazine with him doing a Harley mount technique, me taking it to Guru Steve Fristo and going, nobody can do that. And he lifted up his glasses and he went, oh, he can. And then we went to go see him, and it was like, wow, completely crazy. So over the course of your 30 years of tracking?
More. So starting at 15 and I'm 50.
Wow. 35 years. Years. Tell me about the journey as a tracker, and I'm really interested in what you said earlier about it being unique to the human species.
Okay. Yeah, it's I'll see if I can weave that back in.
Okay, all right.
So at first I just read his books and was like, this is really cool. And then at the back of one of the books, it had a registration form, and I was like, wait, he has a school? I can go learn this stuff?
Yes.
Because I just thought it was cool stuff. I just thought it was a cool story. Guy, as a kid getting taught by an Apache and learning tracking and wilderness survival and Apache scout skills and, everything about my upbringing and my culture and everything that I'd grown up in. Like all of those were just cool. Like every part of that was cool. And human. it cut through all the BS of just like, hey, this is just being an alive human in the world, which really appealed to me because, like I said, I didn't necessarily have a great relationship with society in general. So I just got into it as something fun for me that I enjoyed. It didn't really become the sort of thing where I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You all have to do this. It was much more of like, this is really cool. Anyway, I'm just going to keep doing it. And I wasn't super serious. You know, I know people that get into it and like, as with anything, whether it's martial art, dance, music, you find something new that you're into and you just dive in. I liked it and it was fun and I would do what I could when I could, but I wasn't like, this is my life and I'm doing everything that must be done to become the best at all of this stuff. You know, identifying plants, I just didn't care. I didn't appreciate what that would bring in terms of the kinds of choices that changes in your life to know what you can eat. That's always around you. Just didn't have an appeal at the time. Weird. Maybe because I could always be able to eat. But the thing that I did take to and I did think was sort of the coolest and I could do all the time was tracking, was looking at evidence of something changing, something being different. And the world's always different. You literally cannot do the same thing twice. You can't drive down the same road that you drove down yesterday. Just because it has the same name doesn't mean it's actually the same road. Not when you're paying attention. And so it became impossible to get bored. I mean, I managed it, but but that was always there. So being able to, whether it was just paying attention to how dust settles indoors or outdoors, in certain places, being able, you know, playing little games with yourself, like, okay, without looking up, I'm going to see if I can figure out where the vents are because of how the air is going to move in the room. Or, hey, before I open this door, do I know how many people are on the other side, if any?
Yeah.
Just from what I'm hearing or taking in. So it was just, for me, it was a lot of little teeny bits, lots of little games, and a lot of absorbing stuff non-consciously and kind of getting whatever patterns and stuff to join up. And there were good and bad things about that in terms of my abilities as a tracker down the line. And then I finished college. So took the class 15 and then I was able to take 2 more classes at the end of high school. And then I finished college and I was like, okay, I was going to be a stuntman. But before I was going to be a stuntman, I was going to go take a bunch of classes at tracker school that I've been waiting years to take. And I went and did that. I basically spent an entire fall, did a couple classes in the summer and then spent an entire fall out in New Jersey. And about halfway through that fall, I basically had a moment of, I was sitting just in front of where I was camped for the class, looking out toward where there was a body of water, bunch of trees in between, but could sort of see the shimmer through. As the shimmer was going, it sort of felt like that shimmer was happening in my head. A weird sort of projecting synesthesia kind of thing. I just had the realization. I was like, well, crap. I guess I'm not moving to LA and becoming a stuntman. I'm gonna move to Tahoe and I'm gonna track every day because that somehow is more meaningful and probably would lead to helping people.
Helping yourself, probably too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd wanted to be a stuntman since I was a little kid. I went to the University of Oregon, and that was the only. I didn't do it for this reason, but I found out after I got there, it's the only school you can go to and take trampoline for credit. So I was in the right place. I was taking trampoline and springboard diving, and became an assistant instructor for those classes as well. I spent most of my time in college bouncing. Way more than other class time. And yeah, I thought it was kind of a big thing to have that fall away and it just fell away. it was just like, no, that doesn't really help people. And I think it's important to do that. And I hadn't really had that kind of life where I was interested in helping people.
Didn't even want to be around people for the most part. So now you want to go help people. Yeah.
I mean, that hasn't changed. But that's also part of the motivation of why I want to be useful, because there's just a whole lot of things that humans just don't know that they can do, or don't know that they actually know. And it's as if they're waiting for permission. So I'm kind of going like, you're allowed to be yourself. You're allowed to care about things, and you're allowed to take the steps necessary to follow through on what matters to you. Those are all allowed.
Listen to your intuitions, maybe? Is that?
Yeah, but particularly because you don't know how your intuition works, a lot of folks. And so it's not just listen to your intuition, it's listen, pay attention, figure out how often it's wrong.
Run it through a filter. Yeah.
You got to test it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep track of it, and then figure out, oh, well, then here are some things I can do training wise, getting reps, practicing being aware of certain kinds of things, or aware in certain kinds of ways. It's not just what you're paying attention to, it's how you're paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. And letting that become the program that then filters and instructs the non-conscious, so that then that non-conscious instinct communication can come up and it's accurate. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or it's more accurate. Mm-hmm. And, intuition is a developable skill. And it's the intuitions for different things. Physicists are going to have intuitions about mathematics and energy that are very different from someone's intuitions who play in the NBA. Mm-hmm. They're just, and some people are going to have really, really good intuitions in wild spaces because they have sort of a hypersensitivity to things, because they perhaps even from some trauma, but it ends up making them very good at interpreting signals in wild spaces accurately. Mm-hmm. Other people, it goes the other way. They get really, really, really good at reading people. Again, because perhaps some trauma or something in their life experience. So they're going to have intuition hits. They just catch part of a face a block away, and they're like, stay away from that person. Mm-hmm. And if someone asked them why, they'd be like, I don't, whatever answer I could give you is going to be a made up answer. The answer is, I just know. Mm-hmm. And they're right. There's just something about how that person's moving, how they were looking at stuff. They know how to spot a sociopath, and they spotted one. So that's the other part of it with the helping people, is like, we all have these things. We all have the places that we are better or more skilled and less skilled. We all have the places that we know we can develop more or more skill, or where certain skills are just going to diminish because that's how biology works. I agree. Yeah. And I think that that's just a little bit easier for me to value because of the tracking. Because tracking, you're just evaluating, you're just doing your best to evaluate something that has happened, interpret it as accurately as you can, and then use that to make a prediction for the future. Mm-hmm. And you want that prediction to be as accurate as you can make it. That's the tracking process. And then that can be looking at footprints on the ground. That can be listening to the bird activity and how they're communicating. That can be feeling changes in air pressure and knowing, like, okay, that means the insects are going to start doing this. That means these birds are going to start being active because they're hungry. That means these predators are going to be in the relationship.
That last part might be important, Chris.
Well, and then it starts being like, well, where do I want to be in that dynamic? Mm-hmm. Where am I going to fit? And if I'm, let's say I'm tracking because I'm trying to find food for my tribe. That's going to affect my awareness, my choices and stuff. Cause I might do one thing if it's just me, but there's certain risks I'm not going to take if it's going to put someone else at jeopardy. And that's going to affect not just your decision-making, but also your awareness in general, what you're selecting for to even be useful information that you let in. Because this brain thing that we have, it's basically a giant no machine. It's just constant. Most of the work it's doing is, nope, don't pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Do need that. But we're going to turn those 4 things into one thing. It's an illusion, but it's useful. Keep that. Like, that's what this is doing. And most of it's doing it with no conscious awareness that that's what's happening. And when I think that what sports trainers and stuff are talking about when they talk about flow state, I think they're talking about that when you're just dropped in. It's not that there aren't thoughts. It's not that there aren't feelings. It's not that those things, but those are all just one thing out of tons. So they don't get any extra meaning attached to them or generated or projected or created, actually. Like, we make the meaning. It's not inherently there. So I know this is getting kind of philosophical and weird, but it there's just sort of a state that when you're really dialed in and you're really quiet.
It sounds like a higher awareness.
It's a more encompassing awareness.
Okay.
So, and it's not actually bigger or further up or out necessarily. It's more just a perspective that is a little bit more malleable and a little bit more. It's not just bird's eye. It's also way underneath, and it's also way over here. It's a perspective that is very adaptable and unmoored from any set spot. So, and it's not that that's the best or better. It's just different from when you are in I'm really hungry perspective.
Yes.
It's a perspective that allows one to be really hungry and to be feeling that and to be feeling it fully. But it's more sort of what I interpret Buddhism talking about when they talk about non-attachment. It's just there, but it's not more a part of you. It's just as much a part of me as this hair, but it's that this hair isn't more a part of me than this hair. They're both there and they're both significant in their part, but they are just those things. And I think it's difficult sometimes when people are like, but wait, my thoughts are more important. They're bigger than a hair. If you say so, but only if you say so.
We love to attach value to things, right? So all of a sudden, if I can attach value to it, I can let a lot of things go. But something that really pisses me off, oh no, now we're in a whole different reality, or well, anyway, so that makes
and the thing about the tracking kind of perspective and what it helps develop is 2 really important things end up becoming undeniable.
Okay.
And one of them is, it doesn't matter how much evidence you have for one thing to be true. As soon as you get one piece of evidence that says it's not that, then it's not that. And any trying to force that or tweak it or try to justify or create a story, you're just making sure you starve. It's not just wasted energy. It's wasted energy, and you're not going to make good predictions. You're just not. And the consequences will be clear right away. That's that whole. So you just can't do it for long and be really good at blowing smoke up your own ass. People manage it, but then I go out tracking. There's some folks I've been tracking with that in certain contexts, like their eyes are really good. They're very aware. They can pick up stuff, whatever. but it's where they jump in their interpretations that I'm like, oh, okay. Like every story has to be epic. It's like, the cat walked across the lawn. That's a story.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
Like, why did it do it? Well, because it was over there, and I guess it wanted to be over in the other place. So that's where it went. Or you look at it and you're like, oh, well, that was done at this time of day. So it literally went from that sunny spot over to that sunny spot. But even then, from a tracking mentality, and this is the second thing, whatever prediction you make, no matter how sure you are, you still have like, you might bet your family's life on it. And at the same time, you also are fully aware, like, but I mean, I'm just making the best guess I can based on the information I have. Like, I could be wrong. And you don't get attached to the story you create.
Okay.
You only go on whatever gets proven out. So, and that's when you're really doing it. And, we're all humans. We're going to make our mistakes and our egos are going to jump in and we're going to, but, there was one time I was doing, a tracking exercise by myself. I was doing the tracking exercise. I was with friends. They didn't know I was doing a tracking exercise.
Okay.
So, I had picked two people from the group that, they were very similar in size. They had very different gaits, but they had the same type of shoe. And so the wear pattern was going to have to be, I was going to have to really pay attention to how specific it was to them. I was also going to have to pay more attention to the evidence that wasn't just the wear pattern, but actually what the track itself was indicating. And the game was just to try to make sure that whenever I'd catch at a glance one of their tracks, I just had to verify who it was, like which of these two, just a differentiation game. And I thought I was doing pretty well. And then one of them walked right in front of me after I'd been looking at what I thought was their tracks, and they walked right in front, and I was like, cool, I got freshies to confirm. Let me look here. Oops. No, I've been wrong a bunch of times. Shit, was I wrong every time? Did I flip them? What's going on? And for the next like 20 minutes, half hour, I kind of couldn't see tracks anymore. Like I could physically see them, whatever, but like that attention to detail just went away. They kind of just got fuzzier. It got harder to see the subtle stuff. And I was like, obviously my eyes haven't changed in a half an hour. What's going on? This is what it was, just super weird. I was like, huh, okay. And then I kind of let the game go, came back to it in the evening. So lighting conditions are perfect because the sun is low. So we're getting good shadow. Things get, differences get exaggerated a little bit. I look out at the camp area and all of a sudden I not only can see with good detail each of their trails that were totally winding across each other. Cause this is camp. This is where I was not really playing the game because there's too many variables to be going for. And I wasn't at that level yet. I've had times where I could do that, but anyway, the smart thing would be get out of that space and reduce your, zone, line up the problems.
Try to stack the deck in some type of way.
Yeah. Let's not deal with multiple opponents all at once.
Yeah.
So it was very much like that. But then all of a sudden I was like seeing the multiple opponents and their movement kind of beforehand, but it's in the tracks, and I'm seeing their two distinct trails and able to differentiate them. And again, the light's perfect. So and then from then on, I've been able to tell these two people's tracks at hardly a glance. And the only thing I can account for is I ran into the problem. I logically through reason, saw that I was making a mistake, a significant one, and did not know why. And then I let it go, and my non-conscious brain just went, cool, we're just going to rework everything we had before. And then boom, now I have a program that's in there forever. Like if I get dementia, I'll probably still recognize these two people's tracks no matter what. It's just, and I probably could have found some ways to duplicate that and set up some scenarios. When I've taught people, I've given them things like that but for me, it was more just like, hey, that's really cool. Okay. Anyway, just like keep going. So I've got this thing of like tracking is at the root of everything, but because it's at the root of everything, I'm not like, I have to know the answer to every puzzle. And I'm just like, no, just keep tracking.
Yeah.
And weird shit happen like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. There's a protector course too, right?
Yeah. So when I took the scout class and they had the martial art component, and George Larson, Vanessa Herbst, Paul Bonner, they were the ones that would run it. They would always bring someone as an assistant to kind of get them exposed to tracker, as well as to bring in another flavor. So they had Atticus Todd with them. Okay. So they were my first instructors at the scout class. And then they did what they called scout protector class, which was the week-long intensive. And I kept doing that a bunch of times. There was a buddy of mine that I met through Tracker who took the scout class the same year I did. We were on the same scout team for the second week. We just kept seeing each other at classes and stuff. And he had a similar but different martial art background. Okay. So still like the Kali and the JKD and the Silat, all that being in there, but slightly different take on it and through a different lens. So he was studying that. I was doing seminars, and cut to years later, George and Ness and Paul are like, yeah, we're kind of done with this. We got other stuff we want to do. George and Ness were ready to retire, and Paul was getting busier and busier with pretty well-paying work. Okay. Yeah. So basically, they were like, "Yeah, all right, we're not going to do this anymore." And Tracker School said, "Well, who do you recommend?" And they said, "Harley." And so they contacted me, and I was like, "Well, I can't do this without Ben. I can't do this solo." And so I asked him, and he was like, "Yep." And so we got the blessing from George and Ness and Paul, and got the blessing from Tracker, and we came on as the martial art instructors for the second round. So we do a class. We have two different classes. One is the Scout Protector class. That's just for people who have taken Scout class at Tracker School. Okay. The only reason being, it makes a bunch of other stuff that when we're guiding easier, because the language is already there. Yeah. The analogies are already there. We can, point to stuff. Then we also have just Protector course, which anyone can take. And we have tried to offer that 3 times and never gotten enough signups. Yeah. Even though for years people were like, "Oh wait, but I was like, well, eventually we're going to offer the one for everybody, and we'll let you know." Of course, big part of that is pandemic got in the way of a lot of momentum, and since then people have been, people just don't have the time and the money that they had before. So, yeah, but we are still offering it. I believe this year we have it scheduled out in Washington at Ben's Land for, I think it's the first week of September. I think that's what we have it scheduled for.
That sounds about right. I had looked it up earlier.
Should be on his website.
Yeah. And what website is that?
I think it's just called Protector Training. I can look it up. Thankfully, Ben handles that side of things because he's in one location and I'm usually traveling around. So
absolutely,
it makes it a little easier.
Of course.
There we go. It is called, well, this is a Google site. Maybe that's the wrong one.
There's a lot in there. Welcome to the internet.
Okay, well, I don't want to get too.
That's all right. I'm going to find
bogged down
it.
in that.
I'm going to find it. We're going to get it. We're going to put it in the comment section on the episode. All right. So that way
Sounds
people
good.
can go on and check it out. I knew that there was one coming up this year, and that really kind of got me excited. Now, for a guy like myself, okay, not I'd have to learn all of the survival pieces, right? But maybe the martial art piece would be something I could do. What do you put together in that?
For the just the protector piece?
Just the protector piece, yeah.
It's heavily rooted in ethics.
Okay.
Ethics drive everything. And then we use the martial art as a way, it serves two purposes. One, it helps teach the lessons much more clearly than a lecture or, it just gives you a chance to play with the tools and have the lessons be clear. Even though the lessons might be, yeah, we're learning how to do this, but quote, in the street, in real life, this looks like asking a question or putting a shopping cart somewhere between you and a possible threat. Like, it doesn't necessarily look like combat, because it isn't. It's problem solving. As I say to people all the time, just like, if you get into a fight, you can get hurt.
Yes.
So don't fight. Doesn't mean don't use physicality. It doesn't mean don't use force. It doesn't mean don't manipulate bodies. It means don't fight. Because it's a protector lens. The idea is to solve a problem and preserve a life, and or lives. So, and that doesn't just mean preserving keeping the heart beating and the brain functioning. It also means preserving a certain base quality of life, a respectful quality of life. So then all the problem solving kind of goes through the lens of, is there a need? It's not about preferences. It's not about desires. It's not about wants. It's not about even what's necessarily, what society says is okay, or necessarily what's legal or not legal. Is there a need? Is there a human in front of me with a real need? If we're going to tell people that serving those kinds of needs is important and has value, we need to give them the skill set to be able to do that. Otherwise, to tell people, that preserving life is important, but not teaching them how to actually stop someone from killing someone or what have you, that's not ethical. To tell someone to be ethical and then not be like, you got to follow through. It's the action, not just the moral. So that is what's at the core of everything. And then it's some lecture, a bunch of games, a bunch of training, mostly drill oriented, obviously heavy influence from MKG and Gurdan and stuff, but it's also just, that's fun. Lots of story time. And for the Just Protector, you also are going to get time, social time with people who care about people. Like they're sacrificing their time and their money to get an actual skill set. These are people that are not just, well, but my intentions were good. Like, these are people who understand intentions are fine. Intentions without a skill set are useless. They're just like, hey, I'm really glad you meant well. You caused a problem for everyone else because you didn't have enough awareness. It's, you ever see, you're driving around and someone does the whole, like, I'm going to stop for this pedestrian who's going to jaywalk. I'm going to back up traffic because I'm being thoughtful. It's like, no, you could have kept going. The cars would be through and then the person can walk. Like, they're walking. They're not in a hurry. You're in a car. They're jaywalking. Like, but then that person will still pat themselves on the back for their good intentions. It's like, but you actually caused a problem by trying to solve a problem.
Exactly. The fourth car, the fifth car actually rear-ended somebody, and that person could have waited maybe another 2 minutes to cross the street.
Or just or at the very least, you sat there so that you could feel good about yourself for 5 minutes.
Ooh.
And you probably pissed off a bunch of other people, and now they're going through their day that little bit more grumpy pants than they otherwise would have. So who knows what other problems you influence? It's not your fault, but you were part of it. You know,
sure.
It's I want to steer back toward the class where so it's nice to actually be around a group of people who take that for granted.
They value, it sounds like they value human life in the process, and so they're probably unique people that if you had some time to get to know them, you'd be interesting people.
They're at the very least they're going to be interesting, and more than likely you're going to find certain commonalities. And the thing that's kind of cool about finding the commonalities with people who have kind of a protector mindset is a big part of the job of being a protector is pointing out the commonalities we all have. Resolving a conflict by just saying, hey, that you're arguing this and you're arguing this, but let me just have you guys shift a little bit. You guys see how you're actually for the same thing. There's just a language problem, or there's just a value problem, or whatever. Like, you actually care about the same thing. And that does a ton to resolve conflicts. It's not magic. All this stuff is it's all very practical. It's all very testable, trainable, all of that. And at the same time, super weird shit happens that's really cool. Like, you do it for long enough. So there was a bar I would go to regularly when I was in Atlanta. And I sat in generally at least the same side of the bar most of the time. And I just kind of kept to myself and did my thing. I would go to watch basketball and to play solitaire on my iPad. Not iPad. And one night some stuff was kind of gonna jump off. And I just moved a couple stools in the way because if those guys did get into a fight, I just didn't want it spilling over toward where this family was sitting. And it wasn't a big deal to just kind of go, okay, put this in the way and go back to sitting down. Like, I don't work there. It's not my job to get into a legal problem, whatever. Also, it was just ego stuff. The guys were going to have their little shoving match, blah, blah, blah. Maybe some punches would get thrown. They would get resolved. They'd get kicked out if it even got that far. I don't know. So sure enough, just a little bit of tussle, a little raised voices, a couple of shoves. Bartender speaks up, even though I had told him way before. I was like, that's going to jump off. He was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. But then he learned. Anyway, that all happened. It calmed down. One of the guys was kind of going to come back, and I made eye contact of like, stop. Like, this is over. So he and his friends left, and then the other guys left a little while after. Everything's just back to normal in the bar. And I catch this guy almost across the bar from me, get up, and walk around the long way, which was a little bit weird, and kind of come up in my blind spot, just coming into right here. And I'm just like, I'm aware of him coming around the whole time. I'm like, what is up with this kid? Like, he was he was early 20s. I was like, what's going on? I'm like, okay, just gonna be chill. And he says, man, I saw what you did, and I've been coming in here a while. I see you in here, and I just got to say, like, whenever you're here, I feel better, and I like the vibe in here, and it's stuff like that. Like and I can't remember exactly what the words were and stuff, but of course I was like, oh, well, thanks. That's really nice to hear. And he talks about how he's recently out of the military and he's had his struggles and stuff. But then I was just sitting over there and I watched what you did and I realized I want to be like that. And that hit me really hard because I remember my first I want to be like that moment with one of my instructors and how and I was just like, cool. It's nice to be a part of the link in the, like I'm a link in this chain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an impressive one. No one's going to go walking down the chain going like, oh, and that particular, we're all just, it's not fancy. It's a chain. But to be part of that, to have that impact him and all that. And that was, that's the weird magic stuff. Like it just sort of happens.
The beauty of it is that you didn't don the Dragon Wilson or do anything, whatever. You just merely moved a couple things over, a little bit of a protective barrier or whatever came around the corner, and then all of this just kind of played out.
It ended up being pretty cool. It started out really just annoying. That's the other fun thing about spending time with people who have sort of a protector mindset. You realize that a lot of them, they're not real. It's not about being all Pollyanna and like everything's always good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a positive mindset, but it's not. It's still very realistic, and so it's people who know what the right thing is to do, are working on being good at doing the right thing when it is time. So they actually have that skill set and will do that right thing, even though, and this is the part that doesn't get talked about, they don't fucking want to, and they're hating it the whole time. I know that's my experience a lot. When I've actually done like protector things, I'm constantly going like, fucking people, and they're so fucking stupid. They couldn't just drop this thing. Of course, I'm the only one around here that sees the goddamn problem. Couldn't there just be one other person? Because then I wouldn't have to do that. Like that's all happening. And I helped resolve the conflict. And then I walk the fuck away because I don't want to deal with anybody. And I explain that. And there are plenty of people that I say that and they're like, it doesn't feel good to help people. I'm like, I mean, sometimes, but a lot of times it's just it's annoying. And it's an inconvenience in my day. I'm like, I really, I had a time I was going to go see a friend I hadn't seen in like a decade. And boom, I drive past and I'm like, that car, not only do they have a flat tire, but I know that person does not know how to change it. Like you could just see in the body language, and she's just standing there. And I was like, "Fuck!" So I turn around and I go back and I help, and she's just like, "Thanks so much." And meanwhile, and I'm not being an asshole, but like inside, I'm going like, "Keep your friggin' thanks." Like I hope you're paying attention when I was teaching you how to do this, because I'm not just going to do this for you. And then I was late getting to hang out with my friend. Had a fun story. But it was like the whole time I'm just going, this sucks.
I bet
I don't want to be doing it.
It's very honest, at the same time. Because doing those things make us feel good, right? But then sometimes when we do it at the same time, there's like some, if you could only get your shit together, I wouldn't have to do this type thing.
That's part of the motivation for me to be wanting to teach people. It's like, hey, maybe if more people knew how to solve problems really well, they'd be better than I am at it, and I wouldn't have to do it because I'm lazy. Enough. And yeah, it's like it's. You were talking about instinct.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm doing instinctual training with people. Or at tracker school, they would use like inner vision is a term that they'll use, which is different from instinct. But anyway, there's a relationship there. When people are like, well, but how do I know? Right? How do I know this is really, you were saying sort of a higher awareness or consciousness position. Like, how do I know it's really that kind of, when you strip everything away, that sense of being that remains but isn't judging anything or whatever? How do I know that's what's really communicating and saying this is the right thing and do this right now? How do I know? And I'm like, well, when the feeling is really strong and you absolutely don't want to do it, it's probably right.
Ooh, a lot of truth in that one.
Like, you can rely on that one. At least that's my experience. I don't know. And again, that's one of those ones that, like, you got it, but there are people that where they're at in their developments and their journeys and stuff, like, that's really disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wanted this to be magic. I was like, it can be magic and unpleasant.
Ooh, yes, absolutely.
It's one of the other really cool things about the more you spend time actively training tracking, you start to get a lot more comfortable with unsatisfying answers. We have this drive to ask questions, and that's super important. I mean, that's like at the core of tracker school is this thing they call the sacred question. And it's really two parts. One is what happened here and what does it mean? And there's just so much in that. I could unpack it for a week and still not cover all the ways that there's so much in those words. It's the asking the question that's important. It's really not the answers. And the greatest value the answers give is because they help you get more questions.
Yeah. Infinite.
But you start to realize, like, you get a bunch of questions and the answers start to come a little bit more clearly, a little bit more easily. And a lot of times it's really unsatisfying. You're like, oh yeah, that's not a sexy answer. Like, well, would it be weird if they always were?
Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be, for sure? So the tracking school, the protector school.
Well, the protector's a class.
I'm sorry, protector is a class, and the protector that with for someone who has no prior background. How does that change with somebody who has done the tracker school? Or
the main thing is just that, like I said, if you've been through, to take the scout class, you have to take 3 other classes before that. So you've done a bunch of classes. You've spent a bunch of time in a wild space learning from that space and being directed by skilled instructors. So you've learned a lot. Whether you've practiced or not, you've learned a lot. If you have practiced, there's even more there. So that just makes it a lot easier to, it gives us more stories that we can use to inspire, to direct, or point out a lesson. It gives a more common language. And it gives more depth. It gives more bridges to how to use what you're learning in your day-to-day life. It's kind of like, you can be really interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can be really interested in Lethwei. There's absolutely nothing wrong with diving into those things in and of themselves. And if you have good instruction or you have a mindset that looks for it, the commonalities between those two things will make you better at those things. Yeah. So by training some Lethwei, your BJJ will get better from a certain mindset, from a certain way to train. And so the whole point of training the Lethwei might have nothing to do with learning the Lethwei. It's really about getting better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That is a completely valid way to do that as well. So having the tracker school specifically background makes it easier for Ben and I to have way more ways to make those connections and to find ways for people who, they might be firefighters or they might be librarians. how they're going to apply their protector skills is going to be very different because the context is going to be different. So the more ways that we can make the skill sets adaptable, the better. And since so much of what is taught at tracker school is taught from a principle base, right? It's not, you're not learning to make a figure 4 trap. You're learning trapping, the components of what you need to make a trap, and how to adapt it in conditions and things like that. And the figure 4 is just a very clear, obvious trap for that. It's not necessarily the best trap. It's not even necessarily the easiest, but it's the best for teaching the lesson. So having more ways to show the lesson that aren't just punching, kicking, grappling, whatever, is just helpful.
Yeah. Freaking interesting too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just a little bit more challenge with the regular protector class because it's just more work for Ben and I to find those connections instead of having them built in that we know where they are.
At our martial arts school right now, we're calling it an AIM program, Affinity Integrated Martial Arts, and trying to use a root movement, which I know I'm not thinking myself a genius. It's just I've screwed up the classes so many times that if I could get it boiled down to a root movement, then all of a sudden by the time we're using it later, they have 30 minutes, like some type of inward or backhand. And I'm preaching to the choir once again, but trying to focus more on that than anything else.
Yeah.
Really. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There's so a lot of the conflict resolution stuff that we teach, that comes through a guy named Dr. Robert Humphrey, who was a mentor of Jack Hoban, who's a Bujinkan guy.
Yes, sir.
And all that comes through Joe Lau, who was a student of Jack's, and was an instructor at tracker school for a very long time. Anyway, there's an equation that they put together for conflict resolution. The equation doesn't necessarily resolve the conflict, but it does help you to see the need and if there really is a conflict or if there really is a problem. And the equation is really simple. It starts with the principle or the law. And by law, we mean natural law, right? So physics, whatever. The reason behind why stuff is the way stuff is. Okay. So not the stuff, but the reason behind it. In martial art, we would call that a principle. We also would sometimes use a concept. So a concept is more like, hey, this is a pretty good map, but it's not the territory.
All right.
And then a principle is like, here's why the territory even exists. Okay. Right? Like fractal geometry is a principle.
If you say so.
It's a way of describing the world that is relatively accurate. Anyway, so you've got your idea, your ineffable, your formless thing. Then you've got the context. Just what is the actual, at least for us, let's just stick with what's the physical context, but it also could be the mental focus or something like that. And then you put those things together and you get the form. You get the shape that everything takes. I should go this way. So one way to describe that would be from a tracker school perspective, it would be, okay, the idea is shelter. I need a certain amount of insulation from the rest of the world for lots of reasons, right? But mainly just to use as little energy as possible, right? It's about efficiency. So if I'm in Brazil in the summer, that shelter is probably going to be up off the ground. It's probably going to have a lot of airflow. It's probably going to need to be really good at keeping the rain off, but otherwise kind of not do much for trapping anything else. I'm probably not going to need much by way of easily accessible fire. It'll depend on what the temperature swings are at night and stuff. So that's going to create a certain shape. We're going to get this like stilted, and also it's going to be big leaves for a lot of the roof structure because, that makes sense. That's you've got the idea of shelter, you've got the context, which is hot, wet, right? And then the form you get is this on stilts structure that's good at keeping off the rain.
I'm following you.
But now we go to the Arctic Circle. If you focus on the form, if I'm teaching you shelter and I'm talking about the importance of shelter, and you focused on the form that showed up, and you end up in the Arctic Circle, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Those materials don't exist there. You don't need a lot of airflow. You need the opposite. You need a lot of you need air trapped. So then you end up with, igloo type structures or hide and bone structures. If you focus on the principle and then you develop awareness so you can actually understand the context that's right in front of you, then the form gets created. In martial art terms, that would be the technique shows up. Right? You're doing hubud or something like that, and something happens, and your partner's like, "How'd you do that?" You're like, "I don't know."
Yes, sir.
Meanwhile, Gurdan's sitting across the room going like, "Oh, that's the whatever variant of that type." Like you can know the list. It doesn't, but like all the lists exist because they're pointing at. They can't exist without there being a context from which that form did come, and a principle that guides it working or not. It can also be mixtures of principles, but what the key there is in terms of like resolving conflict, which martial art at its core, that's what it's doing. So protector training, all this other stuff, learning to almost ignore the form, ignore the words being used, and just hear the tone. Ignore the volume and just hear the tone. Before I developed through protector training, I didn't view certain kinds of interactions the way I do now. I will now watch the news and see certain behaviors, and other people are going, "Oh, so-and-so was really, intimidating the other person," and da-da-da. And I'm sitting there watching going like, yeah, that supposedly intimidating person is terrified. That person is terrified. That person has rehearsed that a bunch of times because they are never going to let themselves get bullied again. They're going to all that stuff starts to come through, but you can't listen to the words and you can't listen to the volume. You have to pay attention to what's going on. What's more of the context, not the form. And then,
the questions and the subtleties in which that's your inflection of the questions and whatnot.
Yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating.
The forms are just a bunch of useless answers. Or not useless. They're just useful in that one time.
Yes, we know that to be true, but we like our answers, man. Human beings, we like our answers, and sometimes we're just going to stand by them no matter what, even while the question's changing. And
then we get conflict. And it's not that that's wrong to do that. It's totally understandable why we do it. I do it. I'm learning to catch myself and not do it as much, and have done it. I mean, my problems with authority, that was me projecting like crazy and attaching to supposed to be's and stuff like that, and having my own like strict ideology, however unfair it might have been, and or however fairness oriented it was. So if anything even tweaked on fairness. Like, okay, I get to cut you out, which isn't fair.
I've been there. That makes total sense, Chris.
And we get it. It's understandable that we do this, but it's really fun. I'll take this moment, since this is a martial art related podcast. Like, I think it's hilarious. I used to just find it confusing, but now I literally find it hilarious. Like, I laugh at it when I meet people who are professed to be super hardcore JKD. Like, they're steeped in JKD. JKD is a big part of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also have really, really, really strong political beliefs. I'm like, wait, what? Like, hold on. You're all about adaptable. You're all about understanding how conditions change, and you change with them, and you line up with that. And, the kick happens because that's where a kick is, not because you made the kick happen and all that other stuff. But then in a political arena, you just think, no, there's one right way. It's the right way all the time, no matter what the context. I now think that's fucking hilarious. Like, wow, your life has some real conflict in it. Mm-hmm. This thing that you love over here really is fighting this thing over here, because I don't get it. And I don't mean like you can't have strong values, strong convictions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, if someone's saying, capitalism is the way, it's the only way, it's the best way. I'm like, it's a way. And there's a lot of contexts where it works really, really well. There's also some context where it's a really bad idea. Mm-hmm. Round kicks are great until I'm in the swimming pool. There's always grenades are useful until you're in the phone booth. Mm-hmm. Like, the form focus is the problem. It's like, no, let's get to what's behind that. Like, why do you think that thing is the best? Oh, well, because it provides the most opportunity. Oh, it's about providing opportunity. Well, then let's just figure that part out. But people get attached to the form, mm-hmm. and it's really hard to break away from that. And they get taught, like, that's the thing. What else are they going to think?
Yeah, I don't know, but that is fascinating, and I'm also guilty of every part of that. At different parts of our lives, it's like we choose how much of that lens we're gonna let open, but we don't know until later. Like, times in my life, totally thought the light was shining in, to find out not so much. Later on down the road. Earlier, when we were talking about the tracking, you had said about. I'm going to put it in relation to martial art. Many times in martial art, it is holding on to that skill level, right? Mm. And keeping that. I cannot think of the word that Gordon uses right now, but it has to do with being able to retain the skill is the hardest.
The maintenance.
The maintenance, yes, sir.
Maintenance. Yes, sir. Mileage matters.
Yes.
You can do everything right in terms of maintenance, and stuff's going to break down. It's just going down with use. And I can put brand new tires on a car. Mm-hmm. I can't give myself brand new. I can get a new hip, but it's not a new hip.
Yeah.
It's I can put the spare tire that came with the car on the car, mm-hmm. and it'll get me to where I need to go, but that thing ain't performing the way that good tire would. Yeah. And I'm never going to be able to put a good tire there in that hip ever again. Like, that's just what you're working with. Absolutely. That's the new context. So the form is going to change. Mm-hmm. And that's where that maintenance thing, it's not just about what you can do. It's about what you can do. Like, Sifu Larry Hartzell, he was in a really bad car accident. He's known as the grappling guy. That was because he got injured in the car accident. He was a kicking assassin. There were people that talked about him the way they talked about Superfoot, Bill Wallace. Like, he was one of those. He's standing next to you and he kicked you in the back of the head, or he's standing in front of you and he kicks you in the back. Like, he had super range and definitely power. And if anyone who got a chance to feel what Larry Hartzell could do, he was one of those people that could never not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were doing demo for him, you tapped because it
was legit. Absolutely.
And you were kind of ready to tap early because he couldn't not do it. Mm-hmm. You know, they have soft sticks at the academy because apparently Sifu Larry couldn't not hit you in the hand. You know, it's supposed to be with control. He couldn't not tag a knuckle, couldn't not tag that wonderful spot on the thumb, you know.
Oh, yes, sir.
And so Guru Dan was like, fine, we'll use padded sticks just so I can save my hands.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, now, but here's the thing. Larry Hartzell could still really damage you with a kick. It was ugly. It didn't, anyone looking at it would be like, what? But if you were on the receiving end of it, like, it absolutely sucked. And it's because he still understood kicking. He still understood using limbs to strike and to generate power with his body and to direct that. All that was still in there. So the form was different. He wasn't kicking anyone in the head. He wasn't kicking anyone above the knee. But he was still a badass kicker.
Mm-hmm. We just recently had Scott Higgins on the show. Scott Higgins is a Kempo stylist, and he took me one time when I was at the Inosanto Academy. He took me to Brian Hawkins Kempo School. And I got to meet a gentleman who trained with Ed Parker, but he also got to train with Guru Dan. Mm-hmm. And we went out later and we were having dinner and telling stories, and then it just ended up being me and this particular gentleman, and he turned around and he said something. He said, you know, watching Guru Dan was always amazing, you know, and just watching and seeing everything that he's made in his life, you know, that's just the coolest thing ever. And then he said, but that's Sifu Larry Hartzell. There was something about Larry Hartzell that he was like, he really enjoyed watching Larry Hartzell go when it was time to go. And I always thought that was neat. I got to tell Tim Becker the same story, and I know you were also very, very close to Sifu Hartzell. I'm lucky enough to have seen him in seminar one time, and you know, like every other seminar that I went to at that time period of my life, that was the next thing I was going to do forever.
Right.
And, you know, it's like I went there and I was like, I'm going to do Kali. And by the time we left, I was like, there is this thing called shoot wrestling, you know, and that lasted not very long, but until something else came along and whatnot. But Sifu Larry was amazing. I just wanted to tell you that story.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was he actually was a warrior. You know, a lot of people get into martial art for all sorts of reasons, but fear is usually heavily in there.
Yes, sir.
Whether it's fear of others and they want to be able to take care of themselves, or fear of themselves and wanting to have some self-control. And then there's the people that they just know that they're that kind of human animal. And I think that Sifu Larry was like that. And he actually, you know, he was an MP, so he actually
really had to do things.
Actually did go to war. Yes. I will admit it's not fair, but I'm a little judgy on the just because there's a lot of people that do martial art and train martial art and think themselves warriors or get called that. I've been called that and had people be like, oh, it's because you're a warrior. And I'm like, no, I'm fucking not. I'm trying to be a protector. I'm absolutely not a warrior.
I relate to that for sure.
I've never been to war. I have a heart condition. It was never an option to even think about. So warrior off the table, not me. and I'm fine with that. Like, there are people that are, and I'm glad that they are. And but if you're out there bashing against someone else on a football field, that's really cool, and your athleticism is amazing, and your dedication, all of those things are great. You're not a warrior. Please stop.
Yeah. Well, we like to see ourselves right, and so hopefully as we get older we'll cultivate a cleaner filter and a better lens, and go on from there. But checks in the mail, right?
It's
I'm telling.
it's that there's the body mind spirit thing, and some people run into problems with the spirit aspect, whether they want that to be religious, or they want it to very much not be religious, or they want it to be esoteric or anything like that. I think at least one thing that it is for everybody is a certain self-honesty develops. There's you learn to tune your bullshit detector to yourself. And I think that's certainly enough of a spirit project to be, if that's all you're working with in terms of body, mind, spirit, that's a lot. Go for it.
Yeah.
And martial art really does help with that. You were saying, the maintenance thing.
Yeah.
Whatever this illness is that I've got, whatever the cause of it, it's been, I say, like 13 or 14 years. It has absolutely made my martial art better. And not just because, I went and traveled around more and did more training. I still have to, because I have times where I have better days than other days. And I have to remember the lessons I get from the bad days, where it's like, hey, I can't rely on speed. I can't rely on strength. I can't rely on endurance. I'm going to have none of those key attributes. How do I still function and hang and actually have some sort of at least cause a problem? And then that's where that other stuff starts to come in. So I've gotten much better at a bunch of stuff that people wouldn't have to normally start learning until they're the age I am now. At 50 is that when people start saying, like, yeah, that's, you pass 50 and something happens, like you
just hit 50. I'm in my 50th year, brother. I think it started last year, but I don't know exactly what they're talking about yet. Hopefully
it's like it's that whole, like, in your 50s, just the stuff that's worn down has worn, and that you're not playing the how am I going to fix this. It's like, okay, now I have this forever. Right. Or I'm dealing with this limitation, whatever. But again, that's that JKD mindset and all that is like, is it a limitation, or is this just how well do I know this principle? Context is different. What's the form going to be now? Or what forms are available now? And so the maintenance isn't just a maintenance of all these tools. It's a maintenance of the mindset stuff. So you got the body, mind, spirit, and the spirit's the part that's got to be honest about the body and the mind. It's got to be evaluating clearly and honestly and saying, like, yeah, do you want to do this till you're 70, or do you want to do this for one more week? You can train at that level with that intensity for one more week, and then we'll see.
Wow.
I mean, that's an exaggeration, obviously.
That's an exaggeration, but sometimes an exaggeration is something that we need to put it in a context, right? That, I don't know, I thought that was hilarious. Literally, the second thing that we're talking about right now, I was literally thinking about this morning. Like, it's just absolutely fascinating. So when, first of all, will you come back and come on the show again?
Sure. I am happy to I have no problem talking.
Yeah.
I will spread my BS in the hopes that it provides fertilizer for someone anytime.
You mean this was all BS? No, stop, Chris.
I'm making
playing.
it up as I go, buddy.
Hey.
None of these are my ideas. I'm just passing on stuff I've learned from other people and other places, and I'm just trying to share the stuff I think is useful. Mm-hmm. I'm mostly full of shit, and I'm really okay with that. And
Chris, you know, when I lived in New York City, when I first started waiting tables, there was a lady that was training me, and there was this waiter there, and his name was Chico. And Chico had a habit of just telling people real fast in 7 seconds how it was going to be. And this lady's, she's telling me how to greet the table and how to do this and how to do that. And then Chico sticks his head around the corner and he says, "And remember, kid, the first one to open their mouth, never the one who's paying the bill." And he walked off. You know, so in my opinion, the very fact that you're like, well, there's not a whole lot there, that makes me want to delve more into it, because it's the loud person that's telling me like, no, this is the way, is like, I don't think you can see all the other ways, and that's why you're mad. You know, so
I mean, and there are people who are loud, but there's something in the tone that the confidence is real.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know,
there's different degrees of that,
and it's different.
Mm-hmm.
There's also those people that like you listen because they got quiet. You know, but then there's the people that use quiet to kind of hide and get like it. You know, it's just it's fun to play with it, go through it, and always be keeping in mind like I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing.
More will be revealed.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah,
we will find out. That was when I was doing springboard diving. There was sort of a back and forth with my coach where I'd be working on a new trick or refining a trick I'd been doing, and she would give a pointer and then say, "Can you do that?" And I would just smirk at her and look and say, like, "We're about to find out." And she would laugh, you know, because she came from sort of an old school and a coaching and like do this, and it was sort of regimented. Mm-hmm. You know, not necessarily mean, but like, you know, and so she was softer. So she would ask, like, "Do you think you can do that?" Mm-hmm. You know, and then she's getting my response, which was, I mean, yeah. But the proof of the pudding's going to be in the eating. Yeah, we're going to find out. Like, well, if I don't belly flop, it's an improvement. Like, we're going to learn together. And it was very common. She would ask, you know, can you do that? And I'd say, we're about to find out. And then I'd do whatever I did, come out of the water, and I would either say, yep, or apparently not.
We're all going to find out in exactly 90 seconds, right? That's, yep. There's some realism to that. I appreciate that. We would like to have you come back on the show and talk to us, maybe right before you do your camp, right? Or right after, you know. I'm home very optimistic that it's going to go down, you know.
We have a scout protector scheduled for, I think it's the 3rd week of July. Mm-hmm. So maybe after that.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember what the dates are for Protector out in Sequim, Washington, but it'll be most likely it's going to be like the 1st or 2nd week of September.
Okay. Excellent. Well, right after one or right before, I'll get a hold of you and maybe we can get you back on. And then for any viewers, I will find that information and put it in the comments section. So if that's something that you're really interested in doing, we'll provide you with a little tunnel and rabbit hole so you can find out all about it and maybe go and join Chris. Chris, do you have any advice, okay, for our viewers? And most of the time it's like something regarding martial arts, whatever, but I like to ask, if someone you're training with asks you about something and you're like, well, what is something you can do within 24 hours to enhance your martial arts? Right?
Okay.
Something simple.
Something simple that you can do. Spend a day and it'll change your martial art. Yeah, it's actually stupid simple. as you're just walking around, it's good to use triggers like a threshold, so a doorway or an entryway or something like that. But it's also useful with things like oven, refrigerator, closet door, things that you're going to approach. As you're approaching, without what you're shooting for is not hesitating. What you're shooting for is a confidence and a fluid movement. And as you just come up to doors or come up to thresholds or come up to a wall, approach it at a normal pace and stop where you think you can just touch.
Oh, okay.
Or where you can just put the side of your foot with a side kick kind of thing, right? So it's either measuring out at that low line lead leg distance or high line lead hand distance. Just doing that as you're going around, everything like that, just feeling that bubble around you, you'll get better you won't have to throw a single punch, you won't have to do a single drill or anything like that. But when you go back to the drills and stuff that you're used to doing, your range is going to be way better. That's just a fun game to do all the time.
We are definitely having you back. That is the most interesting answer that I've heard. And that's amazing, and it makes total sense. It's just enhancing spatial relationship consistently throughout the day based on my own range of limbs and whatnot. That's amazing. Chris, is there anyone that you could recommend to come on the show that has a good story? And I don't want to put you on the spot, right? So if you don't care to recommend anybody, it's perfectly fine.
I mean, I think if you got George and Ness on,
okay,
their story is awesome and lengthy, and from George's time when he was in the Marines to when he was introduced to Rick, that story is hilarious. And Vanessa coming into that gym, and they'd be fun, and definitely different. Who else that sort of would stick out that might not think of? Could
you possibly contact them and see if they'd be willing to talk with me or something like that?
Sure. Yeah. They're retired and they travel around in their van. They were the ones that got me started and look into it. But they're usually in Minneapolis, for the 3 months of summer. Okay. So they should be getting back pretty soon. I'll make sure that
I appreciate that. I've heard their names numerous times, sir, and I don't know that I've ever had the opportunity to meet them. And if I did, it was really fast, touch hands, and then go a different direction. But I don't think I've ever had a chance to meet them. So they're fascinating. They're absolutely two of my favorite people, and it's really funny to me that they started out as my sort of first teachers in this family of arts, and now they're just some of my closest friends. That's beautiful. Yeah. Chris, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. It's really been fun, and thanks for letting me do my thing.
Oh, we really appreciate it, and we're going to bring you back, and I will contact you in a little while. I don't want to rush you to put me in touch with them or anything. Whenever it's convenient would be great.
Oh, I'll probably just do it right now.
I have to do everything right now, otherwise I'll forget. So that's what I hear right there at that moment for me. So anyway, before Chris Harley and I forget to sign off, we're going to go ahead and sign off. And thank you for watching the FormABLE podcast. Once again, Jamie Sparling, head instructor of Affinity Martial Arts and Wellness in Wausau, Wisconsin, and Mr. Christopher Harley, who has taught numerous places and had a lot of different experiences. And you're going to have to listen to the early part of the podcast and maybe another episode to get it, because we got to go. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.